Thank you for joining us this morning for our City Council Budget Work Development meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. Connie, could you please call the roll?
Addison.
So me.
Gray.
Here.
Cheatham.
Here.
Lurick.
Here. I'll do it
Ortega.
again after. Yes.
Stevens.
I'll do it again
Here.
after.
Platt.
Here. Thank you. I've got on my schedule here one is roll call 1.5. What is the 1.5? We had to add something. Was that added?
1.5?
Well, I've got it right here, 1.5, but I forgot what you forgot to talk about before on Monday. Did we add, what is everybody else's schedule look like? Because I can't get mine to pull up right now.
Sounds like a good number.
We added Public Works.
Yeah, so we added Public Works. And that's the first presentation for today.
All right,
If you look at your hard copy, Mayor, to the left of your laptop,
Oh, thank you.
that's the new agenda.
This is the one I should be looking at.
Yes.
Agenda item number 2 is Public Works, Internal Services. Jeff, you could have said something. Thanks for letting us flounder over here.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you hadn't turned the floor over to me yet.
I'm just gonna remember. I'm gonna remember that.
I would have thought me sitting here would have been a pretty good
That would
indicator.
have been an indicator, but anyway,
So Jeff, you are 1.5.
All
the
right.
1.5.
That's the highest rating I've ever had.
It's 1.5 out of 1.6.
Okay, I'll take that.
So I hope that we're able to use PowerPoint slides. They look a little better than the PDF files, but I can't guarantee. This is my laptop from home, so I don't know for sure whether that's going to work. But we'll give it a try. So to start out with, this is Jeff's org chart, organization chart. And Jeff, you get the prize for the second most colorful organization chart. The first most colorful was Human Resources. So you may have outdone Human Resources, but here's Jeff's organization chart. Jeff, you might want to explain how this works within the context of all of the departments and divisions that you're involved with.
You bet. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and council members. Jeff Mansfield, Public Works Director. It's an honor to be here today to present Public Works budget to you. A little bit of a complicated org chart. I am the Public Works Director, and I also serve as the city engineer for the city of Pocatello. Under me, I have an executive assistant, and then I also have a deputy Public Works Director, which is Tom. I have 8 departments that are under Public Works. They are Water, WPC, Engineering, Science and Environment, GIS, and then under Tom, there's Sanitation, Street, and Fleet. We have about 170 employees within Public Works, so a large portion of the city. The Public Works department itself is only 2 people. It's just Jen and I, so.
And just for clarification purposes, the 2 people that Jeff just mentioned are organized in an internal services fund. It's identified as the Public Works Internal Services Fund, but as Jeff just mentioned, he provides supervision and has the assistance from one staff person to oversee all of the areas that he does, but the costs associated with that are primarily identified in this fund and are shown up there, and you can see pretty flat as it relates to the total costs, and shows an increase of 1 person authorized over the course of the last few years. Mostly that position, both positions have been filled over that, at least starting in 2020, and I know it is, both positions are filled in 2021, and the anticipation is 2022 would be the same. And Jeff, you want to talk about major initiatives?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I oversee the 8 different departments. There's a lot of coordination and projects that go on involved with the different projects. One of the major initiatives that we've been involved in and currently are working on is our impact fees and then also our energy task force. The council has expressed an interest in impact fees, and so we've been doing some research on that, and that may be something that we'll bring back to the council and present on later if that's something that the council has desire for. Our energy task force is going really well. We've been meeting monthly, and we've been sending out our quarterly updates on that. We've been submitting a lot of award applications. This last month, we had the AIC award applications, and we submitted 3 different applications for those AIC awards. So hopefully we'll do well with those. We've received public works proclamations from both the mayor's office and also the governor's office. And then we also do a lot of grant applications, and we make sure that our projects and our departments are within compliance. And then we also have a lot of initiatives that we bring to the mayor's office and we bring to council that we try to coordinate. So
What's the AIC award?
AIC is the
Is that like a
Association of
grant?
Idaho Cities.
No, I know.
Yeah, so each year they come out with award applications for different categories. And there's 4 different categories that we can submit on. And we've actually done really well over the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. We've received awards almost every year at that AIC
But it's not like a
conference.
grant, it's like a.
No, it's just recognition,
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. But
I just
it
wanted-
really helps boost morale.
Right.
It helps recognize the great things that the city of Pocatello is doing.
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, you bet.
What are some of the initiatives that you've submitted to be considered?
Like I said, we've got the impact fees. Trying to think.
Did you mean for the
For
award?
the awards?
No, initiatives
Oh.
to consider. I don't know about first last time.
We just recently submitted an application with Representative Simpson for the Center Street Bridge project. That was there was an article in the Journal last night.
Terry First Project.
Yeah, Terry First project. We've got the Center Street, or the Old Town Trail connection. We have Greenway projects going on. We have River Vision. We have we did the rename of Northgate, of Chubbuck Road. We just always have something going on. I don't have a lot of specifics right now.
Go ahead.
That's about it. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Better get us.
Okay.
Don't look.
Don't make eye contact,
Yes,
that's
Presentation skills.
just like this.
Chris has a question.
Yeah, so the language says initiatives to consider blah, blah, blah on potential projects to fund. So does that mean, for example, that you've turned in recommendations relative to the Greenway and the River Vision for city funding? I'm confused I'm just confused by what that says and what my experience has been. Anyway,
So primarily through my departments.
right.
Yeah.
Right, but are we to expect a recommendation for a River Vision project that would be funded out of this year's budget, for example?
I don't know that we've seen one for this year. I think that'll kind of come along as the budget gets developed.
Okay, and then likewise with the Greenway, are we anticipating a Greenway project budget request?
Again, I'm not talking about specifically towards the budgeting process. I'm talking about throughout the year, initiatives throughout the year as projects come up. We'll bring those to council and to the mayor and request the funding or the authorization to complete those different projects. Yeah, I'm not talking about specific
Right.
projects for budgeting.
Right, and I know Hannah has come with, just for permission to expend money that she's been able to get through grants or whatnot and so forth, but I just wasn't aware of initiatives on potential projects to fund relative to the River Vision and the Greenway. That's also, I was
Right,
curious.
sure.
Any other questions? Super, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Then we will move to my correct agenda. Agenda item number 3 is our water department.
Give me just a minute here to bring that up. Hopefully it'll work.
Sounds fair to me.
Does Jeff get credit going under?
No,
No.
you
I
kidding
keep
me?
trying to.
Because I had to go twice.
Don't give him credit for anything. He doesn't need credit.
He's already got a 1.5 out of 1.6.
That's right. That's exactly right. 1.5, it's right there on my agenda, right
Go
there.
to his head.
And we're not getting him to 1.6, I'll tell you that. You two are supposed to sing or dance or something while that's working, so.
So Jeff, do you have any large projects? And I was going to ask this question department by department, so you know, maybe that's a bit. But do you have any major, like what major projects that you do? Thank you. Do you envision? In the next-
Sorry.
That's okay, I still need a mom and mine's passed, so
Drives me nuts.
that's good. Do you have any major projects, you know, in the next 5 years that you believe we really need to be kind of thinking about? And maybe you're going to talk about that, but, and there's your chart, so I guess answer that question later, please.
Yeah, I think we'll certainly get there within our operations about some of the major projects that we've got up and coming, so.
Just to comment on that as well, if you'll recall, I sent you copies
Yes.
of the capital improvements
Yeah.
projects for water and WPC
Yeah.
that outlines those projects.
Okay, thank you. All right, Justin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Justin Armstrong, Water Superintendent. It's kind of difficult to see what's going behind me, so I'll try and run on Jim's cues, but
Just look into my glasses, they reflect.
yeah, so within the water department, we have 40 full-time employees. Within separate divisions, water operations, which is over our pumping, purification of drinking water, as well as our water quality sampling and monitoring. Plumbing division, there is 15 employees within that division that oversee kind of immediate maintenance items, routine maintenance, and other programs. And then we have our construction and maintenance division, which is our mainline supervisor that goes forward and does capital improvement projects, mainline replacements, valve exercising programs, leak detection, and so forth. So. Within the overall budget, there's a slight increase within pay and benefits due to wage adjustments and medical benefits. Slight decrease in operational costs of materials and services. And the most notable increase is within the capital outlay with our planned capital projects that have been kind of shifted or adjusted within our schedules, and so now they're all landing within this upcoming budget year. And we'll get into some of the details on that in the future slides. Okay, so within the budget variances, rate study is calling for a 4% increase. The first 3 years of the rate study were broadcast higher percentage increases to fund the large capital projects that were on the front end of the study. This will be the last year of the 4%, and then it's projected in FY '23 and '24 to go down to 3%. And so overall, we've got an increase in revenues of $619,678 for the rate study increases. We're projecting a decrease in the Palisades leases with the joint cities mitigation. The reason for that is when we initially set out, we had set out with a contract of signatory cities onto that, which would provide water for recharge. A few of the cities dropped out of that agreement. They had their own water recharge projects. Those cities were Idaho Falls, Rexburg, and Blackfoot. So initially, within our rate study, that wasn't a planned revenue. It kind of came in 2019, and then in 2021, we had budgeted for that at $137,000. We had only captured a small portion of that, where Idaho Falls and these other cities had dropped out of that agreement. Idaho Falls is back, but that could fluctuate year to year. So it is an annual contract. To be conservative, we've reduced that back to our what we received in FY20. So
Roger's got it.
Have we had inquiries about water? I would think with water calls already happening, that they would see our Palisades water as a short-term solution.
we have received various queries. I know we had some queries within the Portneuf Basin. Some of those queries were if we would be willing to lease some of our McCammon ditch water. We've explored those opportunities. We're currently working with that group to determine what the appropriate lease rate is and get some comparables for quantities.
It seems like if we do McCammon, we're hurting our intent of keeping flowing the river. But I know there's no water master, so it's better to get some money for it.
Well, the McCammon one is an interesting one because it goes through and is managed. We own shares in the ditch, and so to convey those back into the Portneuf River has its own challenges. And so
They can only be used within the district.
Within the district, and they have to be approved by the shareholders. So, but
Palisades, we do have some inquiries on the Palisades water.
Palisades, we haven't received anything recently other than Idaho Falls coming back into the agreement. Palisades is kind of interesting that we own 50,000 acre feet, but depending on the fill rate, we're one of the ones that are last to fill. So just in case, with the snowpack levels and other things, we don't anticipate that we're going to receive our full allocation of water storage this year. They haven't come out with the storage allotment that we'll anticipate, but we've got current obligations for about 2,800 acre feet of water.
How much?
2,800.
Out of 50,000.
28 or 28,000?
Or 28,000, sorry.
Yeah. I was doing that.
Yeah, so we have two lease contracts. Each of those are for 10,000 acre feet, and then within the city's joint city mitigation, there's about just over 7,650 acre feet within that agreement.
So we're roughly 60%. We're just rounding off.
Yeah.
We did have an RFP from IGWA last year that we submitted on to try to do a lease with them, but they didn't accept our proposal on that, so.
Back on revenue, we've got, or any other questions regarding that? Sorry. Sale of city property, we've completed our meter program, and so we're sending less recyclable material to the auction on that. So we've got a slight adjustment in that. Administration, within our operating funds, we've got a reduction in supplies. We had a one-time purchase in 2021 for a copier. And then in discussions with our legal department, we felt it was appropriate to reduce the Professional fees for legal expenses, those have significantly come down due to other claims and involvement with water rights cases.
So it's, the sense is, I guess maybe this is legal, we're getting it adjudicated to the point we don't have to spend so much money defending our position.
That's how we feel about the next coming year, yes.
The bigger costs are within our transmission and distribution. We have a slight uptick in repair maintenance supplies to keep up with inflation. However, inflation, I think, is increasing more rapidly on materials. We're starting to see 20 to 30% in some of our pipe costs and other things. So we'll continue to monitor that. I know we're kind of at a peak now, but who knows what the future involves on that. Within our distribution systems, we have the need to replace the transmission line to the 5 million gallon tank. That will be a project that will begin design this fall and hopefully bid next summer during the summer cycle. And then we've got a few pieces of machinery, vehicles. Our water hauler truck is 25 years old. It's a smaller capacity truck. We would like to increase that size and get that replaced. And then we've got a few trucks and vehicles that are on our schedule to be replaced. The largest expense, and I know we've talked about this project various times, is our Pocatello Creek booster. We are in the process of receiving qualifications for bidders at this time and preparing for bid later this summer. And so the bulk of those expenditures, however, we've been spreading those out over the last couple of years. That's all going to land within the FY22 budget year. And so it's been a build period. Now it's falling within the next budget year. And so
these numbers are going to come this next budget cycle?
That's
Is that what
correct.
you're saying? I
Yes.
just want to make sure I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, in my next slide, I'll kind of show the shift of how we're funding those or how those were aligning within our schedule. The last project is our 5 million gallon tank recoating. We had bid that last fall, and the bids, we had a lot of interest. We had 10 bidders. However, the bid prices exceeded what the engineering estimates were, and by a significant amount. So our average bid for this project was 1.4 million. We had anticipated a cost of about 550,000, and so we looked at opportunities to reevaluate the bids, discuss with contractors where there were cost opportunities to save. One of the largest costs were generator rentals and fuel costs for temporary power. And so what we've done is we've identified that we can establish a temporary power connection off of the power grid, provide that power, and reduce about 250 to 300,000 out of the contract. And so it is a short window. We couldn't rebid it at that time to get the power established. We're in that process now, and so our plan is to rebid that later this year for winter construction. It does have to be constructed within the winter months when our demand patterns are low. So this last slide basically shows our 5-year capital improvement plan. So as you can see with about 5 of these projects, we're doing a shift in our expenditures. It's okay to move projects forward as long as we've got the funding established, and the funding is available within our fund balances. We're just shifting that forward into FY '22 on several of these projects. So the Pocatello Creek Booster, for example, was a multi-year project. Now it's all falling within FY '22. There's a couple other projects that we anticipate will have to shift into FY '23 based on our schedule and the demand for engineering services. And then
I've got a question.
Yeah.
If we're absorbing 20, 30% costs because of materials going up, and who are the engineering services that then are holding it back from getting it in faster? You know, it looks like we hire another engineer or two for what we're absorbing costs to get these projects out.
Yeah, well, one of the challenges with the booster and transmission line project has been with property negotiations on that particular project. We've had various delays in our negotiation process. We had to negotiate with 4 different landowners. And so those are some of the things that we've experienced. We had the intention to get that out to bid earlier this spring. It looks like we've delayed that for a few months. So it's a very large project. There's lots of moving pieces. We've had to coordinate with BLM as well to get permits and other things in place for right-of-way access through Sister Cities Park and some of that. So there has been a lot of moving parts. It's a complicated project, I can say that. And we've tried to keep the ball moving as much as we possibly can on this project. So
I'm sorry, so
Yeah.
the South Valley Booster,
Uh-huh.
it's not being moved, it's being just scrapped?
Well, as we looked at these projects within our plan, the South Valley Booster project was one that we felt we could defer into the next cycle. It is more demand related based on development and growth within the South Valley area. When we initially developed our facility plan, those projections were high. We're still not seeing that growth rate out there. And so we felt like we could shift those dollars up to our 5 million gallon tank project and then defer that project into the next rate study cycle.
Okay, so that's where that money went. Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
And then just, is the Satterfield well number something or other for a city well, or is it specifically for water for the Highland Golf Course?
So the Satterfield well is a well that's owned by the city. It's one that we've had high arsenic levels in. It's right at the threshold. It's never been in production or connected within the distribution system, and we've looked at opportunities how we could utilize that well. And so the best opportunity would be to utilize it for irrigation, because you drop off the regulatory requirements on that. And within that, we would look to possibly expand there's a water feature, a water hazard up there in that golf course, so we could expand that, allow for some storage, and then pump out of that pond and provide irrigation for the golf course.
Where does the water for that irrigation come from now? Just from the general potable water supply?
Right, yep, it's plugged into the distribution system, and that's a very large demand. It's a big burden on the distribution system, so to offload that would provide some additional room for us to grow within the bench.
Some of us aren't in favor of another water feature at the golf course.
Or expanded, right?
Yeah, or expanded, yeah, for sure.
I had a request from a citizen to remove all the trees as well. I'm not in favor of that, but
And where is the High Country tank?
So the High Country tank is the highest tank that we have within our system. It's up to the east of Summit Drive. Supplies the upper Highland bench area. It is a bolted steel tank, and it was constructed in, I believe, 94, 95. As we did a coating inspection on that, it is in dire need of a coating. Those coatings typically last 20 to 25 years. And the challenge with that is you've got thousands and thousands of bolts within that, within the flooring system, within the walls, and so to properly coat the tank is really not feasible. When you look at the cost comparisons, it's better to replace the tank than it is to do a coating project on it, so.
So is there a new design that comes out that doesn't have as many bolts so you can coat it better?
Yeah, so our push now is buried concrete tanks. The overall life cycle costs are way less than these steel tanks. We're getting good life out of our tanks because we are staying up on the maintenance and coating them properly and ensuring that, we're not having significant metal loss. But those tanks are typically, 50 to 75 years lifespan, whereas a concrete tank, for the first 100 years, you typically don't have to do any maintenance on that, so.
So is that the one at the top of the bike trails?
Depending which bike trail, but.
Sorry, but like if you're off Satterfield and you go through the apron and head up the trail, head up the bike trails, is it the one on the right by the service road, or is it on the other side?
So there's two tanks that are just right off of Satterfield. Those are the lower Highland tanks, and there's about 4 million gallons of storage there. And then from there, we boost up to what we call the high country tank, which is up on BLM property.
Okay.
Above Summit Drive.
Okay.
So.
All right.
But yes, there's all kinds of trails that run all over the place up there.
So is the West Bench tank another tank that's like High Country that's going to be needing replacing in the next, or is it a buried concrete tank?
That tank's about 50 years old. This would be the second coating on it. The structure is in good shape. We are experiencing about a 2 millimeter loss currently with corrosion, and so that's per year. So that's why we have the need to get a new coating on that.
So is that tank older than the High Country tank?
It is.
So why is it holding up better than the?
It's a welded steel.
It's a welded steel tank, and so the differences of construction, whereas your bolted steel are usually a lower cost up front, but higher maintenance down the road.
Sort of what I
So,
was wondering, whether at some point in time somebody made a,
yeah, this was a
Short
tank that
vision.
was developer provided, and it was, at that time, the lowest cost solution, but
Right.
yeah.
When do you envision the West Bench tank, what is the life expectancy of that type of design? I mean,
As-
we have another 20 years out of it?
Yeah, if we keep on the coatings, we get 20 to 25 years out of those coatings. So the last coating we had was 25 years ago, and overall it's in pretty good shape. But where you get a lot of corrosion and other things is up along the rafters, and there's an air vent up there that allows air and moisture to condensate and develop, and so that's the point where we see the highest level of corrosion can structurally compromise the tanks.
So when that is recoated, then it ought to be good for 20, 25 years before. And then at that point, it might well be in the replacement range because it's the second coating. Or it could endure, theoretically could endure.
We'll look at the cost options at that time to determine, you know, is it best that we replace that tank or do we go through another coating cycle?
But at least it's 20, 25 years out. And it's-
Yeah.
What does well 22 redevelopment mean? I just don't know, I don't.
So well 22 is a shallow well. It was only drilled to 100 feet. It was within the Alameda town site. And so we're looking, we haven't been able to utilize that well. It's been offline for several years because of the changes in our aquifer and the drawdown within that well. And so we're looking to either re-site that well or redevelop the hole.
So that was the well that I think Janet Hannah referred to, maybe, not.
No, that's well 2.
Oh, okay.
So well 2's not identified within this first 5-year study. That would probably fall within FY '25.
Thank you.
So the last slide we have are the proposed fee increases. This is the typical single-family monthly water bill. The graph to the right compares how the median single-family customer bill relates to other communities in Idaho. And the proposed rate adjustment is about $1.28 a month, which represents...
How much, Justin? Could you?
$1.28 a month. That's for that median customer bill at 6,000 gallons utilized. So that represents overall a 4.5% increase.
Which will then drop to 3% increases
Next
thereafter.
FY '24 and '25, or '23 and '24, sorry.
Oh, I thought you said 4% increase earlier. It's 4.5.
Yeah, overall, the increase is 4% in revenue.
Oh, I see.
Those adjust based on the customer classes, so it's all proportionate to,
Gotcha.
but overall, yes, projected revenues of 4%.
Okay. Super, thank you, Justin.
Yep, thank you.
We will move to agenda item 4 is water pollution control.
Well, while we're getting set up, I think it's important to make it note that our water has to be more costly than flat towns. Because we're putting in a lot of pumping up to,
They all pump to a water tower, Roger.
yeah, but they don't pump several hundred feet, they only pump 100 feet.
A lot of those flat towns go a lot deeper than we have to. Where I'm from, they're down 350 feet and they pump 100.
I'm saying Idaho Falls and Blackfoot and some of those towns, they're flat, they take it out of the river, they store it 100 feet. And one of the things we do is we have to pump it up all our hillsides, which puts a cost factor in there. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think that as you look at this though, I mean, if we're gonna talk about that real quick, Ammon, $36, Idaho Falls, $34.75, Chubbuck, $30.90, Twin Falls, $29.92, Pocatello, $27.60. We are below them.
Yeah, but I'm saying that that's a good thing.
Oh, yes, yes.
When you understand it costs us more to deliver our water than it does those places.
But because we're using groundwater and not surface water, the treatment is much less. We don't have to take contaminants and pollutants and so forth like it does surface water.
Okay.
What I like,
It doesn't cost us more to put all the hillsides with all of our infrastructure and everything else.
Thank you for not having us be at the highest. I guess I'm just going to dumb it down to my level.
what I think is
Thank you.
neat is, and it's amazing to me because I always hear it's cheaper in Chubbuck, it's cheaper in Chubbuck, and this is a very clear example, it's not. It's cheaper in Idaho Falls. This is a clear example that it's not. So we do a pretty good job with our water and distribution and stuff like that. And it's regardless of where we get it or what we do with it, we've done a great job with it. And so
Our departments are very efficient.
I think it's important for our citizens to understand how low keep our water rates and our utilities as much as we possibly can, so. All right, Levi.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Levi Adams, WPC Superintendent.
Where'd the beard go?
It was getting a little warm. We had to clean up just a little bit. Taking a look at our org chart, we are broken down into 4 major categories out the plant. There's a collection crew, which works out in the city. There's the maintenance crew that helps work at the plant and at all the lift stations out throughout the city. There is the operators who run the treatment plant itself, and then we have the lab and the pre-treatment. The pre-treatment is the inspection of all of our industries and our restaurants, and then they also perform all of the lab work that we need to provide for our permit. If you look at the number of employees we've held steady for many, many years. This last year, we were approved to have an employee added to our collection crew. With the growth of the city, it was desperately needed. And this year, we're asking for another employee to be added to the maintenance type crew. With our recent facility plan and facility study, they've shown a deficiency of 2 employees that are needed at the treatment plant. We've asked for 1. This was already asked for in the rate study and has been budgeted for in the current rate structure.
Levi, who did you say, which area did you add it to last year?
The collection crew.
Collections.
Any questions we can go on? We show some of the revenue, some of the major portions that we do get some revenue from farm leases from our biosolids program. The industrial billing is going to go up a little bit. That is a major portion. Those major industries are Amy's, Great Western Malting, On, semiconductors, as well as the railroad. But you can see the major portion comes from utility billing, which is all of the smaller businesses in town as well as the residents. And then there is some miscellaneous billing from interest and things of that nature as well. Yes?
Of the industrial billing folks, where are we on fee breaks for those major users? I think there were some fee breaks for at least some.
There is one fee break, and that was for Great Western Malting. Pardon me while I shuffle papers here.
Sure.
I'll get you the exact date. It came about in 2015, so it was the 2016 fiscal year that those started in. That fee break is a 40% reduction on the flow. That doesn't count for the amount of nutrients, so that all is still paid full. And that will expire in 2026.
Okay, and just because I don't know, how do those fee breaks get put in place? Is that a council decision? How does that?
Honestly, that was done before my time. I believe that was, I really can't answer that. I apologize for not having that information.
No.
I know it was an agreement between Great Western Malting and the superintendent and the mayor, and I'm not sure if the council, I apologize, I don't mean to be.
Public Works Director, Superintendent, and they brought it to the mayor.
Okay.
Who signed off? I guess I want to know, did council make that decision, or was that?
So it became part of the fee resolution after those discussions, which council has to approve.
Okay, all right, and
I'm going to correct the record. It wasn't part of the discussions. It was sent by us the first year it came up. That set the precedent for having it followed from there on out. We never discussed it in the council meeting.
I didn't say that.
I don't, but you said it was discussion, fee discussions. It did not get discussed as part of budget. It got signed on to because we didn't notice it in the printout.
okay, so again, I'm just trying to understand how the process works. So in a typical situation, let's say we have some fabulous new industry that built here, and they want some kind of adjustment, what's the process for that in their fees? I mean, does it get presented specifically as a request from the, I don't know who to look at.
I guess I don't think you're asking a legal question. I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, I want
What's
to
the
know.
legal process to set a fee?
Right.
Well, I'll come down to the table and answer that. I'm happy to do that.
I just don't know.
So, all fees have to be set according to Idaho code. It's 6311 or 113. And that process requires that fees that are an increase of more than 5% have a public hearing, and that the council passes a resolution, and that sets the fees for however length of time it is between that fee and the next time the council sets a resolution changing that fee.
Well, what about, but this is not an increase, this would be a reduction, an adjustment. So
Right.
does it work the same way?
So it doesn't have to go that route, but what we do at the city of Pocatello is we put together an annual fee resolution that includes all of the fees. The fees that are an increase have to be heard at the public hearing, and we have a public hearing packet that includes all of those increases. A reduction in fee doesn't have to go through that, but it does go into the fee resolution that becomes those exhibits that are adopted by the council by resolution and then become what we use to charge whatever the fee is that is being discussed.
So then I guess I would recommend that we have some kind of policy in place that outlines how requests for major, set some kind of a threshold for significant fee reductions, how that occurs within our city processes. Because I think that might, particularly if we're optimistic and we believe that we're going to see some commercial growth, this might, commercial, part of economic development is making decisions about what breaks of various kinds, not just obviously water treatment, the commercial entities get. And so I would recommend that we be proactive and get some policies and procedures in place to govern those requests and be ahead of the game. So I don't know how I make that request something more than I've just uttered something into the black hole of the universe, or I don't know how to move that forward because I understand that there's no action item on the table. So what do I need to say?
I just wrote that down, Chris, and so
Okay,
we'll,
great.
got it written down right here, so
Thank you.
we'll work through that.
It would simply making sure that that particular fee was part of the public hearing discussion would resolve all the issues, I think.
Well, I would caution you, with all due respect, to be careful on that policy because the public hearing discussion and the notice requirements are set by code. And if we go above and beyond that for some and not for others, we could get ourselves into some hot water that way. So, but we could certainly look at some specific guidelines and then follow those guidelines.
Well,
I just wouldn't want them to be so overbroad that they are either one, not able to be reasonably complied with, or two, cut out some for other reasons that really should be included in that bunch.
Sure, and I'm not trying to, make any recommendation about legal language. All I'm saying is that I think if we're anticipating that we're going to, get our act together around economic development, then it's reasonable to believe that various sorts of requests, financial requests, might come at whatever council is in place at that time. And I just think it's wise to be proactive. So I'm not recommending, how it gets written or anything about the legalities. I'm simply saying in broad terms, let's be proactive rather than trying to clean up confusion after the fact.
We'll sit down, I'll sit down with Jared, we'll talk about this and figure out what is best legally and all of that mess and go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just for your information, in FY 215, before the discount, the Great Western Maltings paid $490,000 worth of wastewater fees. And in FY 20, they paid over $1 million worth of fees. So the growth was definitely there for everything to encourage growth, but
And
that's not for,
The fee rate has gone up?
well, the fee rate continues to
Because
grow
they
up.
expanded.
Because they expanded.
Yeah.
Here's some of the capital outlay. You'll notice one of the largest is one combo truck. It's a large piece of equipment. They're one-off trucks. They're extremely expensive, but it's one of those things that when it's down, we need it to work. So we need to try to keep a truck that is new enough and in good enough shape that when we're ready to use it, we need it to use. It will be replacing one that we have. It's not a new addition. Also get another pickup truck, and one of the things that the council has been talking about is energy efficiency and moving to green power. They are starting to produce electric vehicles. Is the council interested in Tom and I bringing something forward on that particular truck to see if an electric vehicle is in use
Yeah,
or
we've had a
moving
discussion
forward?
before, and I think that the answer to that has been yes.
Okay, so I'll
So
work
just
with
take a look at it.
Tom. By meeting, I'll tell Tom to
Do you
help
need
me
a
out.
half ton, 3/4 ton, 1 ton? How big a truck do you need?
They're just gonna be a half-ton truck right now. We don't do a lot of, on the construction side, of heavier vehicles. We have a split fleet. Half of them are half of them are 3/4 tons.
Ford's introducing a new truck this fall. It's $20,000 and it's a hybrid. Electric gas might be a prospect, depending on how big.
We'll definitely look into those and try to come up with some good options before we start purchasing vehicles for that.
I'm sorry, that big fancy, the big expensive truck, is $600,000 for a used one or for a new one?
That is for a new one.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have we had the one we have?
It's going on 6 years.
And is that
And then we will.
about how long something like that lasts?
We ran one for 8 years, and the last year and a half, it was a 50-50 shot whether it was gonna, it was working
Right.
sometimes, it wasn't, and
So about that 6 years
Yeah.
is about the lifespan of something like that?
yeah. If you're not using it every day, it's a little easier, but where we're, in the summer, it's
Okay.
running
Out there, right.
at least 80 hours a week, or 40 hours a week, sorry, not 80.
So what will happen to the current truck when?
They have offered us a trade-in on that, and I think we're matching. I know there's some other departments that don't use it constantly that are interested in it as well, so it may end up still in the city with the departments that aren't using it as much as we are, or we get a trade-in for that.
So is that, I know there's, with some of the heavy equipment, we have that lease agreement, which I'm clearly not an expert on, but we do that, and since some fire departments, I don't think ours, find vehicle leasing to be advantageous. So can you train me up on how
I can, but Tom certainly would love to.
how we decide which big expensive piece of equipment is worth leasing and which one isn't, and why?
Yeah, Tom Kirkman, Deputy Public Works Director. That kind of falls back on the manufacturers. So vehicles like this, street sweepers, garbage trucks, they don't want to do leases because these things get used so heavily that when we return them back,
They don't want
they don't want them.
Yeah.
For like, an excavator, a backhoe, and a road grader, they start costing money at the end of our lease, but they can still sell them to like a dairy or, a
Less-
ranch.
Less heavy user.
Yeah, stuff like a Vector truck or like a street sweeper, it's really only used in city avenues, so there's not another market really for those
Got it.
vehicles. We've tried to get them to lease us street sweepers in the past because I think I've said before that a street sweeper, if you look at it long enough, it'll break.
Yeah.
And they don't want anything to do with it,
Yeah.
because it's a money pit for the manufacturer.
Great, thank you.
That's one of those things that's nice to have Tom around. I'll give Tom a compliment as much as I hate to. But it's nice to have, because, you know, my job is treating wastewater, it's not buying vehicles. And so it's nice to have that fleet department.
Right, yeah.
Right. There's a few other things I wanted to highlight. The CIPP, the cured in place pipe. That's basically the preventative maintenance for all the sewer lines in the city. We go through and we try to get a number of those done as we can. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but can probably repair with the CIPP probably 10 times the length we could if we had to actually dig it up and replace it. So it's one of those preventive things that we continue to do to keep our sewer systems within the city operating correctly. And the life expectancy on that CIPP pipe is upwards of 60 years. So when a pipe is lined, it's good for a long time.
And then with current technology, then you have to dig it up, or you can poke the old lining out?
You can't poke the old lining out. Every time you put another line in, it shrinks the size just slightly. So one time is probably as much as you're going to get. But where they've gone through in some of these other towns, you know, they tell us 60 years, but they started doing some of the stuff in the Pacific Northwest years ago, and where they've had to expand, you know, put a bigger sewer line in, they've dug it up and the pipe looks like it's brand new, and it's been in the ground 60 years. So they say 60, but they're, you know, off the cuff saying, you know, probably get 100 years out of this stuff if you would, as long as
it goes around in most city stuff. You know, be there till it breaks.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions on right here? And that's about it. I'm going to touch on the rates a little bit. We didn't get a slide in there real quick. Our rates are going to go up to 3%. We will be moving up to 31.21, which is still quite low compared to most other cities in the state. I can definitely, I think all that stuff, information was in the rate studies, or not the rate studies, but the fee schedule as well, that was presented a couple weeks ago.
So we don't have a slide, but you can see where Pocatello lies in comparison to.
Would you just tell us real quick, give us numbers.
For example, just on the list that we've had, and this is the cities we've been comparing to for years, Soda is at 59.15, Chubbuck's at 57.10, American Falls is 51.14, Ammon is 49.38, Rexburg is 44.22, Caldwell is 43.28, Meridian is 41.89, Blackfoot is 39.58, we're at 32.21, Twin Falls is at 30.08, and Idaho Falls is at 23.70.
Thank you. Sounds like we're doing pretty good with those rates as well.
In both WPC and water, I know you guys have a lot of certified people to do your job. Have you got a bunch of retirements pending? Are we going to have a problem replacing some people?
There's always a problem replacing qualified people. We do have probably 2 retirements coming up in the next couple of years of some very experienced, people that are going to be difficult to replace. We are getting a lot of people certified above and beyond the minimum requirements, which is a good thing. I think there's been some incentives that have been really helped people, encourage them to get those licenses upgraded. To be in a supervisory position in either both the operation or the collections, you need a Class 4 license. To just be hired as an operator, you're given 18 months to get your Class 1. So there is quite a few years of experience and education that you need. To go from a Class 1 to a Class 4 requires a minimum of 12 years between experience and education. So it does take a long time to get these guys to that point, but if you've been here that time, you're usually a dedicated employee and you want to be here and doing that job. So those are the type of employees that we're encouraged to get.
Are we retaining other people and moving them along?
We're trying to. We've lost a few people here recently. We did lose one gentleman to Idaho Falls. He got a higher paying job up in Idaho Falls. He had his Class 4 and was ready to move on and was able to make more money up there. They gave him a deal where he didn't even have to move to Idaho Falls. They were in such need of operators because there is a limited supply. It's a specific skill. If you're going to work, more than likely you're going to be for a city. There's a few industrial places where you do have a license that's required, but there's not many.
So just to clarify, we didn't lose that person because we also had an open position. It was simply that person had licensed themselves up and a position came open.
Well, and it was a little bit there, and there was an increase in pay too. I mean, that was one of those things.
But was it a straight lateral?
I don't think it was a straight lateral. I think it was a.
Right.
So it went from an operator to, I think, a lead.
Right, and
type
we didn't
position.
have a lead position open, so it's not that we lost in that regard. He was able to find it, I mean, which is, you lose a teacher because they can get a principal job in another city because their city doesn't have one to offer.
Claudia?
So does the city pay for those licensings?
The city
And
reimburses it.
And if so, is there any kind of commitment required on the part of the, I'll say operator, because that's the word you used. So if the city's paying for this class 4, whatever that entails, then is there some sort of commitment on their end to stay for a specific amount of time after that?
There is not a written commitment to that. No. We haven't seen a lot of people have a license and then come to the city, get a license and move on. That has not been an issue that we've seen. The bigger issue is not getting people licensed up far enough to move in when a supervisory position opens up.
Okay, so then with regard to Rick's question with the upcoming retirements, or do you anticipate having people on deck to fill those spots and then you'll hire lower level?
We'll probably bring in lower level people off the street to fill in the bottom and move their way up.
Right.
We do have a couple of people. The collection system is where the gentleman's going to retire when he feels he's ready to go, and there are a couple class 4 licenses within our department that are looking for that, and there's other people that are working towards that, so they have the opportunity to get that job as well.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
Rick?
I'd like to bring Justin into the same conversation, because I meant to ask the question when he was up, but I'm curious about the
I'm sorry,
supply
Justin's
side.
moved on. We're out.
It's water under the bridge.
That's right.
Are you in a similar
No,
situation?
that's why you're
We are, yeah.
almost at the top of the scale.
We are in a similar situation. We've got 2 positions advertised right now for supervisory level positions. They are retiring at the end of the month. And so-
This month?
This month, yeah. So we are currently in the process of recruiting. Similar to Levi, we've got people that have been advancing with their certifications and other things, and, in hopes that they are better qualified for these positions.
So do you have people in the pipeline to replace those retiring?
Yes, I believe we do have some, but they're again similar to Levi, kind of moving people around and filling from the bottom end again and restarting with certifications and trainings. And that's really been some of the challenges that we've experienced is hiring for those equipment operators and heavy equipment operators. We've had a heavy equipment operator position open since April, I believe, and we're not seeing a lot from the outside.
Are you able to steal either one of you from other cities?
We haven't seen that.
We
We
stole one from American Falls. Like I said, it was one of the advantages. His wife worked in town in Pocatello, and so it wasn't, it's not that hard to steal from there. But other than that, really, you're hoping to find qualified candidates within the general population, and then you bring them in and you train them to do the job. It's not something that you can not many people come in off the street understanding. And even if you do have a license, you still need to be trained because everything is different. Every treatment plant's different, every water cistern, every collection system's different. You have to learn what you got.
Does ISU have an education program for water treatment or water, whatever your degrees are in?
No, they don't. I mean, there is some applicable experience within the engineering fields and other things like that, but as far as a technical program that
They don't
trains
say that
water
there
and
isn't
sewer
one that we
operators.
should partner with and draw from.
Chris, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the projected building boom relative to INL and the 9 projects and all of that, and the ancillary building. And I don't know what is required to be a heavy equipment operator. But I'm wondering whether or not increasingly, as those projects get off the ground and they're talking about building a man camp in Idaho Falls to bring in, up to potentially 500 additional construction workers, et cetera, I'm wondering if we're going to continue for the foreseeable future to have this situation where, you can go work on federal or federal-related projects for a lot more money. And basically, our market is going to be dry.
Well, I think that's what we're seeing right now is the construction boom, within public works, within streets and water and WPC. We're seeing challenges trying to recruit these people over to the public sector beyond the private sector because, things are booming so heavily and we're all competing for the same workforce.
Even in the private sector, they're looking for employees.
Right.
I mean, it's rough.
Right, I'm just, again, I probably won't be around to have to worry about it, but I could just see us getting into a kind of a bidding war, which sounds scary.
Yes, because we'll lose.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to agenda item 4, which is information technology. 5, sorry, agenda item 5. I've got to look at the right agenda here.
I'm just going to give a real brief introduction on this fund as well as the next one. These are both internal service funds. Information technology is set up as a internal service fund and provides service to all of the different departments throughout the city. And we prorate the costs associated with providing that technology service. And each department receives a bill in the form of a transfer. And that shows up as a transfer expense in the case of the departments that are receiving those services, and it comes in as revenue into the information technology fund. And that's also true for the next department that we'll talk about. And from that, I'll just let Chris take it away.
Thank you.
And you notice that Chris looks a little different than he has in the past, yes.
Caterpillar left my...
A little less like Conan Doyle.
Everybody's getting into their summer phase.
It's my post-COVID, post-pandemic look, so.
Fresh start.
Yes. Mayor, Council, Chris Sorensen, Chief Information Officer for the City of Pocatello. So we run a fairly flat organization chart. I've got 6 people that work for me. Each has a very specified expertise that they work, though many of them are cross-trained to work cross-functionally in these different areas.
Technical difficulties on this side, Chris, but it seems appropriate that it would stop.
Of course. Does that mean I'm done? Thank you very much.
Maybe not.
That didn't seem contrived.
That's right.
Sorry.
Everybody has the hard copy, Chris, and so
Okay,
you can continue on.
then we'll move on to the next slide. There on the bottom, you can see that we picked up one additional slot in 2019. That was when Channel 12 and video services went away. We picked up the video information piece for the city. Very critical position, especially over the last year, 14 months as we've gone through COVID. And we had to maintain open meeting laws and shift into streaming and bringing on our GoToMeeting platform so that you all were able to have your meetings and do it in a safe environment. I am one of the departments that is not coming in flat. Technology continues to increase in costs. We have numerous maintenance contracts. They go up regularly in costs. We also inherit, after a department brings on a specific piece of information technology, if that technology expands across the city, after the first year, IT picks up the maintenance on those costs, and that's one of the reasons why our costs will expand over time. On the next slide, it's just kind of some of our output summaries, some of the numbers that show how busy and how massive our department is managing equipment across the city. 700 PCs, website visits that are exceeding 500,000 hits now. We have 45 plus platforms, programs, websites, et cetera, that we support and maintain. And we continue to do it as per the Gartner study that I quoted last year. Still can't get the new one without spending tens of thousands of dollars to see the new numbers, but it's very evident that we are working well below the national standards with the number of people that we have in our department. As I previously mentioned, our costs continue to climb as departments implement new technology, and we pick up the maintenance on that technology. The inflationary practices of vendors and maintenance contracts continues to go up also. With all the cyber activity that's been in the news lately, and as always, cybersecurity is my number one concern for the city. It just takes one person clicking on the wrong thing to bring us to our knees. We do lots and lots of things to make sure that doesn't happen, but there are no guarantees in today's market. I'm working with Dr. Staley at the INL. We are doing some research looking at the skill set that we have here in the city and whether it meets the requirements that are necessary to ensure that our cyber needs are being met. And recently, President Biden issued an executive order highlighting the requirements for cybersecurity. And one of the things that's in that executive order is the requirement to have a fully trained cybersecurity team on staff. So again, continues to be my number one concern. We have some experience, we just don't have the expertise and certifications that we believe are necessary. In my operational budget, you will see that our maintenance agreements are going up 14.4%. That's where my major increase is. A large part of that this time, in addition to some of the programs we've absorbed, is our Microsoft Exchange server is now over 7 years old. It's at end of life and needs to be replaced. We have two options. We can bring a non-premise system, which will run approximately $100,000 to do the full upgrade on that, or to move us to the cloud. And we have done a cost analysis and a return on investment, and we firmly believe that the right answer with where technology is going and everything, that we take our Exchange server to the cloud at this time. And that'll run us about $20,000 to $25,000 a year to maintain those licenses. We also believe that in the next 5 to 7 years, Microsoft is no longer going to offer on-premise systems. They're going to force everybody to the cloud for these type of systems. So that's one of the largest increases in our maintenance agreements that we'll see. We have seen a 5% increase in our Albert Intrusion Detection System contract. That is with the Center for Internet Security. Albert is an extremely powerful system that monitors the activity on our network. Within seconds of somebody doing something that could potentially be dangerous, we get notifications in IT to investigate if necessary. And it is money well expended and has saved us numerous times. Our KnowBe4 cybersecurity training contract, we have eliminated that because ICRIMP is now paying for that. ICRIMP got a statewide contract, and that is a savings of over $8,300 a year to us. We've also rounded out our fiber installations across the city. We believe we now have fiber at every viable location that is worthwhile having. We also have some minor increases in hardware and software and other purchase professional services. But other than that, everything else has been kept flat across our department.
Roger.
So, do we have one contract with a fiber provider?
Yes.
And do we negotiate that contract?
Each connection that we make, we negotiate the different pieces of it. It's with Direct Communications. They're really the only viable contractor in the area. Before them, it was a much smaller company that we had services with, but they only had 1 or 2 routes in and out of the city. Direct Communications is a regional fiber company, and they have numerous in and outs into the city.
I just heard that they negotiated, I think it was them negotiated yesterday with another public entity to help drop some of their fees.
Yeah. But we've worked with them on every one of our connections. Recently, they developed a new installation technique where they can drop fiber down a road, cutting a very narrow strip and laying it directly in. Has saved us a significant amount of money in our installation costs. So, and we worked with them, and they worked with public utilities to make sure that everything was working according to the way they wanted it to work.
Just
Linda?
curious about viable locations for fiber. What are some examples? What makes it viable?
The fact that if you can get there relatively easily. For example, we can't take it out to the cemetery because we only have a couple of computers out there, and the routing just doesn't work. It took us a long time to get it out to Fire Station 2, I think it's 2 over off of Arthur in that area. And they wish they had not done that for us because the volcanic rock they had to cut through was extremely expensive. We have a couple of other small locations that just doesn't make sense to run the fiber there with the cost that it takes to get it there. But we now have it out at the airport, we have it out at WPC. I think we have almost all the fire stations. Parks and Rec, the zoo, we now have it. Another place we can't get it to is Ross Park. It just, there's no way to get it there.
Through the rock?
But there's just nothing else down there to warrant running the fiber down there, so.
Okay. Chris?
In some IT organizational charts for entities that have a lot of computers, the computer technician count seems to be, tends to be really high and outweigh the other positions. So I'm just wondering if you could help me understand that you said that these positions are highly specialized, although there is some cross-training. So that suggests that one computer technician is taking care of all the computers in the city.
He does a lot. Our network manager also assists him with a lot of that, and our audiovisual technician has picked up a lot of the support for there.
So would it be, perhaps it would give a clearer picture of your department if some of these boxes were, split. So, because the question from this org chart that immediately came to mind is, do we actually have enough audio-visual work going on to keep an audio-visual technician,
Most of his work, ma'am, is after-hours work. And that's where we really utilize him. When he's not doing after-hours work, he works, assists in these other areas where appropriate. The org chart is laid out the way it is because it's a supervisory level type chart. They work directly for me.
Right. Okay. And then the network manager, when he's not being a network manager, he's being a computer technician? He
is almost fully engaged as a network manager. He also does a lot of our cybersecurity work for us. He assists when necessary or when called upon. These are all operational issues that I manage within the department and distribute the workload appropriate.
Right. And so then the webmaster, we had a recent webpage tab discussion, and then apparently that issue was at least initially dealt with, not by the webmaster, but by our planner, at least that's the person.
Content of the websites is the responsibility of the individual departments and what information is presented. The webmaster ensures the web is working, helps with graphics design, and works with our contractor that actually runs the website. He also does an extreme amount of additional work supporting HR, wellness programs and other things with graphics, and as well as the intranet, the internal system.
Okay. And then what do senior programmer, I mean, I know what a programmer is.
Both of those are analysts. They're the ones that assist with the data manipulation. The system programmer analysis also doubles as our help desk person, as well as my admin assistant. The senior programmer analyst is the one that manages all the databases, has been key to helping finance present all this data and gather all of this data.
Okay, so if we were to delineate the sort of equivalent FTE that we have in computer technician type work, because it just seems to me that with the number of computers that we have and computer replacements and all, you know, it seems like, so I'm wondering, what is the equivalent FTE, give or take, and I mean, this isn't a gotcha question, if this needs to be answered at a later date, that's fine, but what is the equivalent FTE that we have in computer technician type activity? I mean, if you take bits and pieces of...
It'd be difficult to say. You'd have to do a work desk audit to determine that. Right now, they're 1 FTE for each of those positions. They're all fully employed. That they just help each other, back up each other. If my computer technician is on vacation or sick, would those other guys have the capability to step up and stand in there? When my network manager is on vacation or sick, others are trained to come in there. Again, to figure out what you're asking, I believe would take a desktop audit by an HR contractor.
Okay, all right, and I'm just trying to get a handle on how, if we have, and I know not every employee is at a computer all day, but if we have somewhere between 600 and 722 employees, that seems to me that we would have a lot of computers out there, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
We do, and again, because of the efficiency of our department, we really operate at about 1/3 the national average. That's because I have an extremely qualified team, a very dedicated team that works the hours that are necessary. And when they're here working, they're working full time.
So, and to be perfectly honest, part of my question arises from, on several occasions when I called the IT department to say, you know, can somebody help me with this or that? The person that I'm talking to can't help me, and they say, well, no, that the only person who knows about that is this person, and so then you'll have to wait for that person, and we'll have to track them down and so forth. And so I'm just thinking about, you know, the cross training and the efficiency, and whether or not we're really truly operating in a cross-trained way, or we're pretty siloed, and whether or not apparently being pretty siloed is our best operational model. And like I say, those are questions that I have, and the other question, big question I have is, when was the last time that we did any kind of exploration around outsourcing portions of IT, because that typically, depending on the type of organization, is one area where outsourcing can be cost effective. And I'm just wondering, when was the last time we did any kind of study around that?
I don't think we ever have, because it's always been cost effective here in-house, and we've been able to get people to respond quicker in-house than not.
And if we've never tried anything else and we've never done a study, then how do we know it's most cost effective?
I'll address it to a degree, sir. Previous life, Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel, massive numbers of people that worked for me. Over 500 when I was stationed in Hawaii, directly working in my tutelage. The Air Force, the federal government, almost every agency there will go through this pendulum. We're going to do it all internal, we're going to outsource it to contractors, or we're going to do it civilianized. In my 28 years in the Air Force, that pendulum swing back and forth. There is no perfect solution, but we have a solution right now that is working for us, works effectively. One of the reasons why sometimes when you call and they can't answer your question quickly is, one, they're busy servicing other people. We don't have people just sitting there waiting to answer phone calls, and sometimes, depending on the specificity.
The specific question.
The specific question you are asking, that person that you have on the line may not have that right answer at that time. And so, yes, while it's cross-trained, you may have gotten the person that didn't have the answer for you at the time. We try to get all calls answered within 2 hours, one way or the other.
Right. And I'm not suggesting a solution. I'm asking a question, and I'm asking a question based on the fact that IT is an area that sometimes does get, or portions of it, sometimes do get outsourced. And I'm just asking, what research have we done, what data have we accumulated, that convinces us that we are being as effective in this arena as we could be. That's all I'm asking, and it's not a challenge.
Heather, have we done any data collection? Have we researched this at all to see if it would be efficient or not?
We have not looked at an outsource of the IT function while I've been here for 5 years.
So the answer is no, we haven't.
Okay.
And my personal experience is the cost of doing one wouldn't warrant it.
Jim?
So in my previous life experience, and as you can tell, I've had lots of previous life experience, one of the areas that I looked at, and in the case of Garden City, Idaho, we looked at providing sort of a hybrid approach to the question that you have. And I'm sure that has been examined. I'm sure Chris Sorensen has seen that approach taken as well. In the case of Garden City, we had a very, very small IT staff, and we were able to get the higher level service we had contracted out, and it was related, they were on backup essentially when the staff at Garden City couldn't provide direct support. We had the next level of support which would kick in, but you pay, it's kind of like having a fire station that's there for when you have the big fires, but you want to have that fire station there in order to provide that extra level of service. It does cost more. And based on what I've heard from Chris and what he's said today, would indicate he's made every effort he can to keep the costs at the minimum level. There probably are some ways to examine additional service that could be provided, either on a hybrid model or some other approach. But quite frankly, it's going to cost more. That's my experience with it. I've also seen it done where there wasn't any outside contracting at all. Chris mentioned as far as the pendulum swinging back and forth. I've seen it where the entire provision of IT services were done by internal staff. And as you might guess, that was in Coronado. They had lots of money to spend on lots of different elements associated with information technology. They were able to spend the money that they needed and did it internally, and I think that was the best, most efficient model to do that. I would be glad to help Chris, maybe Chris, work towards seeing whether another approach on a hybrid model might be available.
And I don't know that I need that, I just was wondering whether or not we had ever looked at it in an organized fashion, or we had any experience. And I mean, that's So you've answered my question based
Sure.
on your experience.
In Garden City, we went through a process and actually did a request for qualifications. and
Right.
We're looking for some specific services to be provided.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I had a couple of line item questions.
Okay.
If nobody else, unless somebody else wants to
Go ahead.
jump in. Okay, so can you help me understand the differentiation and relationship among the following line items? It's 050 dash,
I just need the last 4 digits.
oh, okay, perfect. 40-05. So that's consulting services. And then I understand what maintenance agreements are, so I don't think you actually have to address that. And then other purchased professional services, which is 40-99. And how do what differentiates those lines?
Okay, consulting services occurs occasionally when we need to call, especially Microsoft. We have something that we can't figure out. For example, with our Exchange server a couple of months ago, the different, they're called volumes, they kept dropping off, and we couldn't figure out why they were dropping off, and we would have to restart them each time. So we had to contact Microsoft and have them look into our system and figure out why this was happening to us and help us come up with a solution. Those are the type of things we go to consultants for when it's something that's just beyond our capability and our knowledge base, and we need assistance in doing that. Other purchase professional services, those are usually items that they just don't fit any of the other categories. It's something that is being provided to us by an outside organization. In our case, it's almost all of our fiber optic connections we link under there. Our internet services we put under there. Some of the custom stuff that we have to ask Central Square to do for us is under there. That's where our cybersecurity training platform was under there until it moved over to iCrimp. Our Albert monitoring service is there. We have a social media archive that we have to maintain for historic reasons. The contract for that is there. Our land sweeper, which is something that manages our IT inventory
Okay.
and things. Those are just all kind of things.
Got it,
They just
got
don't
it.
fit another category very well,
Sure.
so.
Okay, great, thanks, that makes sense. And then a 63-01, I assume, is related to 40-12. So 40-12 being training and registration, and 63-01 being travel and meals?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Those are for everything from conferences to training sessions that we send our people to, so that they can stay current on all the different systems that we have.
And when we send people to those trainings, do we use a train-the-trainer model, or do we individually send everybody to be trained?
No, most of these attendees are one-on, single individuals go to the various trainings.
Great.
There's a couple of conferences, for example, when it was held and when it will be held in the future, the SunGuard Central Square Now conference, because there's so many different elements being
Right,
worked out of the
multiple
conference.
people.
We send multiple
Right.
people so they can
Got it.
attend the various
Okay,
things.
thank you.
You bet, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We will go ahead, I just got a request to take a break, so we're gonna take a break for a few minutes. I don't even know what a few minutes is anymore, but afterwards we'll be back with utility billing, so just please be prepared. Thank you for joining us after the break. We'll go ahead and continue on with agenda item number 6 of utility billing. Cindy, how are you?
Great, thank you. Mayor, City Council, Cindy Robbins, Utility Billing Director. Start off with our organization chart. We are a team of 12, and we've been that way for the last 6 years. All right. Moving on to our budget, we are coming in flat. We don't have any requests for you. Good to hear, right? Good for us as well. So no questions on that. I'll move on. The next slide does show our Operating budget being the same, I did list out our main inputs just to give you an idea of where we're heavily, I guess, our expenses come from. Anybody have any questions on that at all? You guys are great. The last slide I have is it's just a way for me to compliment how well my staff is, how well we run, and how much we are a very busy office, and it just shows a tip of the iceberg of what our days and our year consists of. We also appreciate, we work with a great group of enterprise funds. They do a great job in their funds, which helps us because when they're not having to raise their rates, it's easier for us to explain that as well. So we really appreciate working with the enterprise funds we get to work with. So, anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you.
If we don't, you're gonna win the prize.
For the
I knew Chris is gonna, she's trying to figure one out, so.
Yeah, so this is really not a question for Cindy, it's kind of a general question. I just keep noticing, and in some departments, this makes perfect sense, and I get it. I see clothing and accessories, and I totally understand, steel-toed boots, and I understand mechanics overalls, and I understand fire, police uniforms and all of that. And so the question that is in my head is, do we actually have a city, I don't want to call it a uniform, but we don't seem to have a required city imprinted dress code, and yet we seem to be buying clothing and accessories in all kinds of departments, and I'm just curious, for you, we don't have meter readers anymore, but at least they're walking around scanning. So I'm just curious, across some of these administrative type departments, what is the clothing and accessories line? And I don't, like I say.
Well, for ours, I can tell you, ours are more protective things than just, whether they just have a shirt or anything. Ours can be a hat. We do want to make sure that they are shielded from the sun.
Right.
It can be the safety gloves. We have the raincoats we do provide because they are out there in the weather. So they're kind of different things, they're simple things, but
Right.
they are more to protect them from the elements because they are required to be out there.
And that makes sense. And so then that brings me to curiosity number 2, which is why are these on essentially, and again, this isn't directed toward utility billing, but why are these line items essentially apparently annual? I mean, I know I had a Hawthorne t-shirt, but I wore it for 5 years. And I also paid for it, but anyway.
Again, in our case, I can answer some of those. And unfortunately, there are sharp things in our vaults that when our guys are getting in there and stuff, they do have to rip things. And so annually for us is, if needed, it's not a guaranteed thing. It is as needed, and our guys do. Unfortunately, they can rip something, and they can rip it a week after we give it as well. So.
Do those line items then roll over somehow or something? In other words, if I've got, $2,000, sorry, to make you get more exercise at your frail age.
You notice I didn't trip that. I think that's probably more of a general question as it relates to line items in general. And I appreciate Cindy's answer as it relates to specifically the clothing allowance. So, and it's not really a clothing allowance, but if you were to look at clothing and uniforms and those types of items for just a moment, separately from all the rest of the line items in the budget, I'm not saying that there's a policy or a practice that would be similar throughout all of the city, but I think, and this is what I've seen in my past experience, is that the elements that you have in some of the union contracts, which apply to safety, making sure that people have a clean uniform when they're out in the field, that they want to be presentable to the public. And there's a lot of different elements associated with being presentable to the public, including the cars that you drive, all of those different elements. But the clothing that you wear has a lot to do with this. And in the case of utility billing, they have people that are out in the field that are not only, they still do some meter reading, but they have to take care of the facilities that they're in charge of. So they should be presentable within that context. So I would not, if I were to look at ways to reduce budgets, I wouldn't look at that particular way to do that. But I think what I'm hearing is this sense that you get a line item that has X amount of dollars in it and that you're entitled to that from that point forward as a department. There is some of that, I have to admit, within the context of what has been presented to me over the course of the 4.5 months that I've been here. But I've seen the same thing in other agencies as well, and I'm sure you have too. So we haven't, and again, I'm not going to advocate going to sort of like a zero budget approach. We haven't, I don't know when the last time that was used, if it ever had been used here in Pocatello. I've seen it used, but I haven't seen it be successful. That's just my sense of it. So what you have instead of that, which is what we have here, is sort of like, so this is what we budgeted for last year to provide this level of service. These are all the line items that we needed in order to provide that level of service. I think each department goes through a process that they're trying to establish what it takes in order to provide that level of service, including all the line items that go into that. Could they review those line items a little with more scrutiny? I would say perhaps. You know, I haven't really delved into the depths of determining whether they're really looking at all the details at each line item level to make sure that they've really scrutinized those as much as possible. I would hope that they do. I went through the budget, all of the budgets with the individual department heads, but needless to say, I didn't have a lot of time to get down into the details. And I trust the department heads to do that, and I should hope that they would return that trust within the context of making sure that they are providing the best representation of what it takes to provide services at the level that they are. Should they look a little bit deeper? Maybe. I mean, I'm not going to say that that's not possible in every single one of the budgets, but the practice has been is when you have a budget line item that has $2,000 in it, typically, yes, that would be carried forward into the next year with some review to make sure that you heard earlier, I think it was in the case of the water department where their legal line item, they looked at and they realized, you know, that they really didn't need that level of expenditure. And I think for the larger line items, I think that's what I'm seeing is there is that level of scrutiny and review. For some of the smaller line items, maybe there could be a better look at that and maybe a policy or a practice that would help us a little bit along those lines.
And my rollover question was actually about, thank you, I appreciate that explanation and information, was really more about, you know, if I have $1,000 and in year one I spend $500, where does the $500 I didn't spend go because I get $1,000 the next year as well?
So if you don't spend the $1,000, or if you only spend $500, and you have a difference of $500 on that line item, so long as you brought in the amount of revenue that was anticipated for your fund, or most departments don't have revenues, conceivably that goes into fund balance. That's part of our general reserves. There's different philosophies about what fund balance means, and I'm not going to give you a real technical discussion of it. I don't think that's what you're looking for. But it could be viewed in different ways. If you're entitled to the same dollar amount in your line item, then technically you're taking what was in fund balance and moving it back into that line item again to make it available for budgeting purposes.
Part of the reason I ask is because it's a question I get asked a lot by the public. Because, the perception can be out there, well, basically, the city just made $500 because we asked for it and received it from the taxpayers, and we didn't use it for what we said we were going to use it for when we collected. I mean, this is extrapolated, but this is, I think I can see where people are coming from. And so I just, I think it's a legitimate question from their perspective.
I understand, and I agree. I would also say that there is a model that's been used by, I believe it's the federal government, that pretty much says you have $100 or $1,000 in that line item. You better make sure that you use every single dime of that, or you're going to lose it.
Which has all kinds of...
And there's connotations associated with that. Is the more responsible approach saying if you don't use it, that doesn't mean that you should make every effort that you can to use it.
Right.
You should try to save as much as you possibly can.
$500
But you should also take a look at the next year's budget to make sure that you need that much.
Thank you, Rick.
If I can add to you, I was going to say there's a lot of our departments, it's nice to be identified, and where we require those shirts to say who we work for.
Oh, sure.
We provide, and that's one of the reasons we buy shirts to identify, so people do know who we are in their backyard. So just wanted to add that one too. So
I always appreciate that.
Yeah.
Seeing ID.
I mean, it's a safety
Cindy, in your
issue.
major initiatives page, you've got a lot of statistics here. What's the timetable? Are these monthly, annually?
those are annual. So I went ahead and broke them out. If you have any you'd like to see, those are just annual things. And not that you can't do math, I know. I was just going to say a few of them, if you had some, I quickly ran some numbers for you. So
Okay.
those are the ones I can actually account for.
On that page, those courtesy phone calls,
Yes.
Is that actually somebody in your department calling, or is it some sort of like an automated system?
Used to be me. So yes, I did record a lot of those. And this last, the company we were using, we did change companies, and so we do have, it is now an automated voice that's on those, and talks much slower than I did because I had to get 20 seconds in. This one gives 45. I was out of breath when I had to record how many of those, but so yes.
Okay, super. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move to agenda item number 7, which is the liability insurance risk management.
Good morning, Ann Butler, Risk Manager from HR, and I'm joined with Andrea Henderson from the Legal Department.
Sorry, there you go.
You're good.
Yeah.
So risk management, which is made up of liability and workers' comp, there's 1.5 of us. The other half of Andrea works in legal. Fund 02, which is liability, you'll see a decrease in pay and benefits for next year because Kirk was an attorney, and his benefits were different, so you'll just see a decrease there in that fund. We have maintained a 1.5 person for the last 5 years. Work comp, you'll see that currently this is flat, but we're going to propose something slightly different in the next slide for you. We have been to you guys every year asking for an increase in the modifier on how we fund work comp. So currently we are at 75%. The goal is to get to 100. So the two reasons we would do that is, number one, our claims history. So our work comp claim history is saying we need to fund this at a higher level, but also some legislation you guys are familiar with, presumptive cancer and PTSI claims for first responders. That's about 4 years old legislation now. We've been talking about it for a while. In talking to Jim about 1.5 months ago, we were talking about what that 10% would look like. The projection file I saw was about $128,000 increase. I believe Jim has built that in, assuming that you guys were comfortable with that. Is that correct, Jim?
So just to explain a little bit more how that works, in everybody's budget, any department that has personnel in their budget, it shows what their personnel costs are. It shows essentially their insurance costs, and then there's a line item for workers' comp. So essentially there's rates that are developed for each one of the classes of employee that relate to pretty much what the industry standards are. And what Ann is talking about, you have a rating that is 80% of what, and I'm not saying that that's what it is here, but as an example, 80% of what that industry standard rate would be. We're trying to, based on our experience in claims, we're probably moving it closer to the 100% level, which means every department gets a little bit of an increase in the cost to that department. You won't see that necessarily in the risk management fund per se, but over the course of time, what we're anticipating is the claims expense that we're having, which gets recorded in this fund that Ann is talking about, needs to be funded. It gets funded by the departmental charges. So what we're proposing is increasing the departmental charges in order to help make sure that we have enough money to pay for claims as time goes on. We always want to have enough in reserve in that fund too, and also the workers' comp, both funds, to make sure we have enough there to pay for claims.
So I need to see if I'm tracking with you. So the higher rated areas would be contributing more, and the lower rated areas would contribute less. Like a clerical without much chance of getting hurt, it's 0.03.
You never know, one of those paper cuts might be very expensive.
But the standard is just say 0.03. And then another industry, or let's say somebody that's putting pipes in the ground, they could have a very high rate along with. So it would be adjusted to the rate that would be charged by normal workers' comp fees, so to speak.
Yes.
Or rates.
We are self-insured, but we try to have enough in the tank, and we have to have more in the tank for those workers that when they get hurt, it's more expensive.
So we would be mirroring the industry, so to speak.
Yes.
Rick?
Jim, what kind of calculation are you using for this presumptive cancer and PTSI? I mean, how are you factoring that in since they're such new things?
That's way beyond my area of expertise, but I don't know if Ann has an answer for
So right now, PTSI has been fairly inexpensive. We've had 2 claims in the last 4 years. I do have the numbers. I think we've spent, PTSI, we've spent about $3,000 on. So in the grand scheme, that's not much. Presumptive cancer is going to be your bigger hurdle. We do have 2 claims currently. Right now, they're looking at around $50,000, but those could go up. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is maintain for the rainy day. We need to build those reserves, so if something does come up that's bigger, we can handle those. We do, of course, have an excess policy. Roger asked about the other day. It is a $500,000, so we pay up to $500,000, then they pick up that from there.
Okay. Super, thank you.
All right, I'm curious as to, you talked about those 2 areas, but in general, how much have we had in workers' comp claims like last year, for example?
Sure. We typically have 100 attended claims, so that's medically attended. They're going to the doctor, and then we're asking employees to report non-attended. So in a normal year, we have about 100 non-attended claims as well. So about 200. Last year was pretty low because employees were doing other things or not wanting to go to the doctor. So we had a really good year. But in general, we're running about 200 claims. And that cost varies.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to agenda item 8, which is the Business Improvement Fund.
So we have a series of elements in our budget that relate to kind of miscellaneous areas. This is one of those areas, and we make essentially we make loans to people based upon them being qualified. And I guess I'm the one that gets to talk about that. I'm not the one that actually makes the loans. Our planning department is more related to that. But it's an estimate as to how much we're going to spend in the year related to the qualified loans, the process that we go through. It's more or less kind of a placeholder in our budget. We don't know exactly how many of those we're going to get throughout the year.
Sorry, I need to know, like, write an example.
Yeah, and I don't have a real good example for you.
So who do we loan?
So I think that an example would be the facade program that we've had. The businesses can borrow money from the city. This money did not come from taxpayers. It came from another area, which is long before Roger might know where it came from. I'm not positive exactly where the money came from, but if I remember right, there was a federal grant years and years ago that was to give money away, and the cities converted that into a loan process so we could continue to loan money if small businesses would like to fix the facade on their facility. We would loan them at a low interest rate. They would have to come up with X amount of dollars to match that and some things like that. But this is a few years ago. I think we had 2 different things that came up with this loan, but it doesn't get utilized on an annual basis by any means. It's just money there that's available, and we can.
So if they are loans rather than grants, where are we capturing revenue?
It comes into that fund.
It comes right back into
Yes.
the.
So do we have any pre-existing loans that produce any revenue?
We do. And I couldn't tell you the total amount, but let me see if I can get that for you.
I think that they've given a grant before. They've done some loans before, but the 2 that come to mind that I can remember was the boxing building that the city owns, that we did some facade work on that. That was a grant, not a loan. And then there's another business down in our downtown area that needed to do some paint and stuff like that on their facade, and so they borrowed the money for that. I think that is a loan that is involved with that.
How does this get administered?
Planning, the planning department.
So they just make a decision that it sounds good and they do it?
Yeah, there's an application process that people have to go through and stuff like that, and then, yeah, they make that, because these loans typically are a couple $1,000. They're not a $50,000 loan, or we're not going to do something like that, but if it's going to help them, beautify the area, that's what this was set up for. And I couldn't even tell you when it was set up, quite frankly.
In the dim and distant past.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, definitely distant.
Pretty dim.
I'm curious about, it seems like this money at times is used for, I don't know another way to put this other than kind of internal versus external. Like, if it's used to help a business, to loan money to them, or if it's used to help one of our own buildings that we own. And is there a difference in the way we treat those? Like if we needed to do work on a building that's a city building, who applies, and are they treated differently than an outside business?
I can speak to the boxing building that we did, and in order for us to grant money to that, we had Stephanie Plodgy with the Business Improvement District apply for that.
As the applicant?
As the applicant, in order to do that,
and that's where I was kind of going with this is, and for other unrelated reasons, it's kind of on hold indefinitely, but the task force that was looking at the Great Home building was looking at this fund and potentially applying. And in that case, we were working with Stephanie Palagi, so I guess she would have been the applicant there too.
Yes.
Do we try to get somebody from kind of an outside organization to be the applicant?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then that was a grant, you said.
It was a grant. She applied for a grant on that.
So then
If
this-
I remember right, anyway, I mean.
So then this business improvement fund can be used for grants and loans?
Yeah.
It was set up as a grant program from the federal government. The city years ago decided to make this a revolving fund that we could borrow money to and then
Okay,
and
so
go from there.
I think that predates me by quite a bit.
I think it was, I really think this happened even before Greg Anderson was the mayor.
Yeah, and I have a sense that his fingerprints won't be on it when I stay here.
But probably wise, because I wouldn't have a clue who would be on it.
This did not occur to me yesterday because I wasn't realizing that this facade money can be used on our own buildings, but can it be used for the library and that third problem?
No, I'm not sure that was the intent behind it, but at this point, I'm not sure.
I think that's a different situation because it's not like fixing up the facade, it's a problem with the building, but they also have
Well, it's
the
affecting the
money.
facade.
It's
Yeah.
affecting the facade, but I would
would keep
read
it
this
for
so
other-
that businesses can do what they need to if
Yeah.
they need it. So, Chris.
So my question is, and there may be no out, but is the city the best place to house this money, or would it make more sense in terms of getting the word out, et cetera, to have it housed under, I don't know, CDBG or NeighborWorks or, some organization that is actively kind of interacting on this level? Because, Stephanie might know about this fund, but, a youngster trying to start a business would have no clue.
It has to be in a certain area, so it has to be downtown, I believe, right?
So-
So she would tell anybody that is in that area.
Is that
I'm going to speak when I probably shouldn't because I'm not 100% positive, but I believe that is the case, and I believe the city was the applicant, so it has to stay with the city. It can't be transferred to anywhere else.
Could we get information about this fund?
If we can find it, yes.
No, I'm not research information, but PR. Can we get word about this possibility out through to PDA, to NeighborWorks, to...
I think
They will
that
know, it's on the website if you search for the facade. Applications and everything are on there and all of their requirements. It's a little bit, it could be better.
Can we get it?
Yeah, we can, yes. The simple question is yes. We can look at it and see what we can do, but we need to find out exactly where it could be used and all that stuff,
Sure.
but put that on the website, so yes.
Yeah, I mean, if we can help our small businesses, rather than just sitting on the money, let's make it work to help our community.
But I will say that Stephanie actively promotes this where applicable.
Sure.
So it's not this big secret that people don't know about or.
Well, and
I think we can put it out there.
And if it has to be used only, in historic downtown, but I mean, at the time I asked the question, I didn't know that.
Sure.
Yes, so,
No, I think we'll look at it and see what we can do.
And I'd like to know what our account balance is versus what our budget is. To know, what we've got out and stuff like that.
We'll get that information.
Just so I have a big
Sure.
picture.
Last I looked at it was somewhere around 76, 78, 76 or 78.
We'll task him to
But I
get
can't
that
remember.
for us, but we're not.
I shouldn't, don't quote me.
This is, I'm hoping nobody quotes me on anything I said there because it's,
Never mind.
okay? All right, then, let's move then to agenda item 9, which is the Chief Theater Fund. Another fun one.
So this fund is used, we talked about this just a bit A couple of weeks ago. The Arts Council is funded as, you see a $10,000 amount there. And the request is again for $10,000 funding. I don't think we had the Arts Council talk at that meeting before, but this is a fund that has a balance and is being depleted over time. And I can get that balance for you in just a second here.
And if I remember right, the question was asked, what are they doing to be able to maintain and this, and do they know it's going to run out? And the answer is yes, they do know that it's going to run out, but what they're doing to maintain it is...
And the question is, do we want to have a fund that runs out, or do we want to have a fund that perpetuates? I mean, that's a perspective too.
Well, that was not asked the other day, but it's definitely a perspective that we probably could have a discussion on.
So could I poll the council and see and again, I have no complaint vis-a-vis the Arts Council. I just think it's, it's something that this fund is something that deserves a little discussion. So can I poll the council to find out whether or not, because I'd like to have this on as an agenda item and poll the council and find out if we're, as a council, in favor of that? Of what? Having a discussion of our Arts Council funding, which would include this money as a discussion item at at some point when we're not budget slammed.
So let's not poll the council. I don't think that Jared was excited about polling the council, but why don't I write it down and we'll put it down and so we can discuss it
Probably
and find out.
discuss it in our liaison.
In a liaison meeting.
That concerns
I mean,
the Arts
Yeah,
Council.
yeah.
I mean, I guess because I am requesting that this be on an agenda and, in the most gracious manner, I will point out that I have requested other items in the somewhat dim and distant past that have yet to see the light of day. And so what I'm trying to work toward is, as a representative of the people, how can I guarantee that a legitimate discussion item actually ends up on an agenda and be gracious at the same time?
So why don't we do exactly what Heidi just said and have this discussion at the liaison meeting so that we can do that and then it'll go from there.
Well, I kind of think it's legitimate in terms of budget, because if we're defunding something, and the presumption is we're doing it for a good cause, then it's going to end up back as a request to us when we don't have funds anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I'm thinking.
that's the route we're on, is if it's legitimate and we deplete the funds, and how are we going to fund it? And I think we need to wrap our minds around it.
For this budget, it's not going to be depleted.
No, but we need to know what the future is. I mean, if it's going to be depleted next year, 10 years, whatever, what is our
No, I'm just trying to
plan?
understand if you're wanting to.
But I'm thinking what he's thinking. I think that's
Today or
something
tomorrow,
we need to
or
have a
talk about-
conversation in budget, in the
Well, we got
context
a
of
long
the budget.
future in our budget development, and just to be presented with what it is, but not know what the context is and everything else.
So we'll get an accounting on what money is available in this fund right now, and then we will have the discussion as we move forward. I think that next year's budget will be okay, but it will be important to understand when this will deplete it and what we're going to do
We
in the
might budget
future.
according to our own sense of what depletion should, how it should occur.
Okay. Okay.
I can tell you at this juncture, there's about $52,000 remaining
So at that
as a
rate,
balance.
it's 5 years.
Right, which is pretty
Which
much.
doesn't count this
figure
year's.
Is that, those are the terms in which, again, and this isn't a negative statement, it's just that that's essentially how it's talked about in council meetings, is we have X number of years left. And which is what prompted my question to them and then later my question here. But I don't even know if that's cast in stone or if it's just 10 grand a year is kind of the way it's accidentally developed, or I have no idea.
We'll do a little bit of research and find out how we came up with the $10,000 a year and all of that stuff.
Is it going to be 42,000?
So, Councilmember Ortega is asking whether the $52,000 is as of the beginning of the year or the end of the year. And it would be as of October 1st, 2021.
Okay, so.
And so then with this request for another $10,000 to be used, that would bring the balance down to $42,000.
Okay. All right. Super.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move to agenda item 10, which is the ambulance fund.
So despite the fact that Chief Gates did such a great job a couple weeks ago on giving us a very cogent but yet brief presentation, we've asked him back again to give us another brief presentation. But this is part of the city's budget. There are some elements, many of the elements are still not developed yet as we speak. It's dependent upon Bannock County and their process that they go through in their budget. And I'll let the chief take it from there.
Mayor and Council, Chief Gates. So the ambulance fund is a dedicated fund managed statutorily through the county. Basically, any revenue we can get through the county for this fund is normally we try and achieve that. Our fund is basically comprised of two major revenue sources. It's about 50% property tax and 50% fee revenue. This year, my request basically includes taking our transport fee revenue to a $1.8 million, which is, a little bit of a reach, at least according to Christy Klosser, who is our county, but I think we've shown that we can do that. And right now, it's the assumption that we would take the full 3% property tax, which I can tell you I'm not confident that the county commissioners are willing to do, much as you have kind of indicated in your own sense. But that's our starting point. That basically increases the contract about $133,000 to what we can then use at our discretion. We have earmarked a couple items, including pay raises, medical benefits increases, as well as the South County Ambulance Services requested a slight change to their staffing model and also a $52,000 administrative fee to the city. That's what's rolled up in those requests, and I would stand for any questions.
I'm sorry, is this part of what's going on?
What we can levy in the ambulance fund does have an impact on how we negotiate.
So
it is part of that negotiation?
Yes.
Okay.
And what we use, the funds that we get from the contract, both limit what we can offer, but also what we end up choosing to use that for. So for example, if we chose to give more in pay raise increases, then we may have to take a reduction in the administrative fee that we would receive from the city to offset that, if that makes sense.
So, Chief, real quick, how close are we to the fund limit, the ambulance fund limit? How close are we to that? When they did their levy reset, when they added the ambulance, that bumped us right to the levy limit. That's why they did that levy limit. When they did their pretty massive appraisal adjustment, that took us away from that levy limit a little bit, but we're still capped by the 3%. And you can't take more than the 3%, even if you do. I don't know what new construction is going to come in at, so there might be a little offset. The county may be willing to take the new construction, but not the 3%.
that's kind of where we are in negotiations. Christy Klosser and I work really closely about what seems reasonable to pull from the fund. They normally have funded the 3%. Last year, they actually funded out of foregone a little bit, or not foregone, excuse me, out of reserves. And they normally fund all of our capital requests through their any reserves they have.
So the counties also, they are indeed also under the same stipulation of the total 8% cap, regardless if they take the 3% and then new construction and then whatever else. They can't go over it, so that's
correct.
I'm assuming
they're under the same constraints we are.
The ambulance fund is also part of that 8% as well.
Correct.
So. Rick.
Chief, is the city of Pocatello managing the ambulance fund the best way to do this for Bannock County's residents?
I believe so. I believe we're giving a really good service to all of Bannock County. In our system, we're leveraging fire resources and EMS resources to provide a better service to the entirety of the community. I gave some examples. If you look at Meridian Fire, Napa Fire, they still respond to EMS calls just like the fire service does, but they don't do ambulance transport, and they aren't able to take that pool of resources and use them as needed for that type of thing. We run a volunteer program in South County where our call volumes are low, but where our call volumes are high, our ambulances are running 2,000, 2,500 calls annually, compared to Lava's 200 calls annually and Income 120. And then we provide that ambulance backup service, the ALS level service to South County. So there's always more ways to improve, and we continually look for those. Efficiencies are really what it's about.
Well, you mentioned Meridian and Napa, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they house the ambulances? If the fire service isn't doing that, where are those ambulances housed?
So you have the two services. There's Canyon County and Ada County paramedics. They are a standalone entity of their own. Same basic model. They respond to an ambulance. Boise Fire responds a fire truck. Napa or Meridian responds in a fire truck. They respond in an ambulance. In some cases, they co-locate ambulances within the fire stations, but in some cases, they are actually deployed in their own garages. And in a lot of cases, in those services, their EMS systems run more of a 12-hour shift as opposed to a 24-hour shift. And so in a lot of industries like that, they actually don't have a garage. Their ambulances are basically always out in the streets driving around. And in fact, if you look at the major metro areas, they use such GIS data to such extent that they know in probability terms where they're likely going to be, and so they will actually forward locate an ambulance and have it sitting at the intersection of Polk and Oak because there's likely going to be a car crash. And so they literally co-locate them, and because they work a 12-hour shift, they sit in their ambulance, kind of like the police do in a way. They run a shift, if that makes sense.
I looked into, since this came up, I can't remember how many years ago, but a couple of years ago, the county talking about putting out an RFP or, contracting with some kind of national ambulance service. And so, I had concerns about that when that was raised. And so did some research of my own and looked into that. And my biggest concern, it seemed to me that this is what happens when you contract with these national companies. They may come in with a lower bid, but what you have to look at is what you get for that. And you do not get the level of service. So you may pay less, but you'll get a lot less. So I still, after looking into that, I'm still very much in favor of us providing that service in our area, because I think we can do it at a level that those companies, I don't know whether they can or not, but won't. And we won't get that from them. So
So to
That's
kind of
just
give
my
that
feeling.
example, and even in Meridian and Caldwell, Canyon County and Ada County, that's very similar in the sense that the Canyon County paramedics and the Ada County paramedics, they do not do anything for fire. The fire department will respond and do, what we call initial care, right? But they can't transport. In our system right now, I have paramedics who will actually make entry and fight fire. But then I also have firefighters who, when all of the ambulances are tapped out, they're all out on calls, they can jump into an ambulance and we actually provide that transport service. And that pooling of resources to me is exceptional. It's a great benefit to the city. It's also a great benefit to the county. And that just provides, if I have a plane crash, God help us, where's there, at the airport, if we had a mass casualty event, we could throw a lot of ambulances at that mass casualty event that those other services just don't have the depth to do that.
And it's run by people that live in the community, come from the community, care about the community. I think there's a lot of things that affect the level of service that make me think that that is still the better way to go.
I agree.
Are the Canyon and Ada County organizations, are they locally based? I mean, it's a local contract.
Yes, those are, very different.
It's not a national contract.
So in Idaho, by statute, the county is tasked with providing the service.
Yeah.
But then how they provide it
They
can be.
can contract.
They can contract out, yes. They can, which is what they've done with us, but we're still local.
Right.
They were talking about putting it out as a
Right.
national.
And getting a company like AMR to come in and bid, that's always possible. I mean, and I agree with you. I think they can come in and they can provide for less, but will you get the same level of service?
So I don't even know what this next question/comment portends, but what would it do to the service to the community if the county came in similarly to what we heard from sanitation yesterday, and they simply said, guess what? This is the new thing, no negotiation, and they said in other words, if essentially they said, we're terminating this arrangement and we're gonna go do something else, or you can provide the same service for half the financial support. I mean, how vulnerable are we to Pocatellans being, damaged? I mean, their service being damaged by a sudden action by the county, which we don't have very much forewarning about. That was a complicated mess.
Well, certainly there's exposure. I guess from the positive side of things, we have been doing this since '78.
Right.
Those of you, I'm going to date myself, ever remember Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto from the series Emergency?
Oh, yes.
That was back right in '76 was when the transportation department said we need to have EMS providers out in the field. That show came up shortly after, and literally in '78, right after that, we started providing EMS service. So quite frankly, I'm pretty proud that our city jumped on board with that. And I think that our track record is our history. We've been here for a long time. There's always a threat, right? I think that's why it's my fiduciary responsibility to ensure that I'm providing the best service at the lowest price for the county. And as long as I continue to do that and be open and transparent with them, then they know what they're getting and the benefits that they get. Can they take it away? Absolutely. You'll lose I'm 1/3 paid for by the county. Chief O'Hearn is 1/3 paid for by the county. You would lose 18 line people, 1 battalion chief, a whole bunch of office staff that are all basically co-working. So it would be a huge impact. But I think the county would lose a lot. I really don't think they're going to provide, and in the end, I just don't think they can provide the service, and I'm not sure that those other entities would want to come in and take it.
Well, at the end of the day, the reality is the county can pull the plug anytime they want. They own the responsibility, they've given it to us.
Right.
If they say we're not doing it, then they're not doing
Right.
it.
I just wanted some sense.
They have the same risk. At any point in time, you as the council could say, we don't want to provide this service anymore, and that would leave them
Yeah.
with that, so.
So I have a question by Bray and then Cheatham.
But I don't know if it's a question, but it's more of a statement. 70% of the people that are serviced by ambulance district lived in the city limits of Pocatello. Anything that harms 70% of the population better be thought through well. Because where you are third and Chief O'Hearn's a third, they're going to have to staff at full time. There will not be shared costs.
Correct.
We would increase our exposure, yes, but they would bear the whole cost of ambulance, and I just can't see it happen.
Right.
It's a economy of scale that cannot be replicated. And they can fool with it all they want, but it cannot be replicated because we have services that are shared.
Well, and it is a little bit different. Councilwoman Lurick is right, and Councilman Cheatham. It's a little bit different because we don't have a landfill that we can parlay against their landfill, so to speak. I mean, it's not quite the same mutual benefit, symbiotic relationship. And so, but I just wanted to get a real sense of what
Well, they could do it. I mean,
impact might be.
You could get somebody in there, two people in the commission that arbitrarily say, we know that everything's broken, we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
And they could turn it on and see it.
Do it in a heartbeat. Rick?
You bill for ambulance services, correct?
Correct.
Is that person paid for by the county?
Yes.
Where does the money go? To the county?
So, yeah, the part of our budget is based on that fee revenue. So that, again, 50%, approximately, 50% is fee revenue based. The county takes all the money. So if there's any overages, it just goes to their fund balance. But that's always there for us to use. It is a dedicated fund. By statute, it's a dedicated fund. They can't take that money and say, oh, well, look at that. We've got an extra $100,000. Let's go use it to solve the sheriff's problem. They can't use it to go solve the landfill problem. They have to use it within the constraints of the statute. So it's really a dedicated fund. So it doesn't matter if they keep the money. I will say Idaho Falls does it slightly different. Idaho Falls, they keep all the fee revenue internally, and that never goes to the county. Just different contracts at the time, and everybody could come up with a different way to do it. But we chose to let them manage that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Not quite as brief as the last one, sorry.
No.
That's because you had the county you were representing.
That's right. We'll jump to agenda item 11, which is Education Benefits Fund. Please.
There we go.
I gotta buy this picnic table Clibbies. Tired of tripping over it.
Heather Buchanan, Human Resources Director. Currently, for education fund requests for fiscal year ¡22, we have $82,000 being requested by employees. As you can see, the budget behind me is slightly higher than that. We are about $40,000 into disbursements for this year. We do see a lot of those come in again in the summer from summer courses.
Questions? That was the fastest we've had. Thank you very much.
You win. How critical is this?
See, you talked too soon.
I mean,
Is there a commitment?
There is. The commitment is because it's housed within both union contracts, so it has to be offered to at least a portion of our employees, which means you would remove a benefit from the non-represented.
No.
She's talking about the commitment
I
from the
meant a
employee.
reciprocal commitment on the part of the employee.
1 year.
Okay.
1 year from the date of your last payment. If you leave, you owe any money back in the previous 12 months.
Okay.
Limits on the program are IRS mostly defined, and it's by calendar year.
Okay.
how critical is this benefit? And I'm not pushing an agenda, I just don't know. How critical from your perspective is this benefit to what we maybe talked about earlier in terms of, training people up within our own system for future promotion within our system, and also for retention. And even with a one-year agreement, I understand the catch-22 here, but is there any chance that we are inadvertently training people for other municipalities?
We sometimes lose people who have a degree to other professions. We lost a person at a police civilian to be a teacher. But the return on investment we got for that employee while they were here being educated, their work quality went up, their communication skills went up, their ability to interact in interpersonal relationships, I think covered the expense that we put out for the degree. Talking about, because we've talked about water and wastewater, specifically the certifications that we need. We've actually done a lot on that, and it's hard to lump that into an education category because there's not very many institutions that offer a program that you go through. It's a lot of self-study or a couple-day seminars they then go test on. Tom and I have met with both AIC and another state group, please don't ask me to come up with their acronym right now, about maybe starting to, Pocatello's offered to be a model to go into the high schools at junior and senior year and talk to students about what programs you can go into at the city that have a lifetime career span. So that would address some of the certifications we're looking at. The problem is a lot of those certifications require that you be 18, and our positions require that you need a CDL, which also means you have to be 18. So we're going to try and get interest at the lower level, but it's very hard to do any sort of training ahead of time other than this is an introduction to public works or emergency services to educate them what we do, but none of that falls within IRS code as far as tuition reimbursement programs. That would be like a training function the city would pony up out of a separate fund.
Rick and then Linda.
Along those lines, would what you're looking to do perhaps apply to ISU's workforce training continuing education program?
We've talked about that as well, and a big focus that we have been trying to get moving for the last couple of years is kind of an internship with ISU for mechanics rolling over into fleet, at least get some training, some hands-on experience. We have some very, very specialized equipment they won't be able to see elsewhere. We think we have a natural progression to flow people through a program. We just don't have a ton of openings, but it would help them at least show if they have interest. If you're a mechanic, we ran into this problem when we were at Fleet. Mechanics at parks worked on a lot of small gas engines, mowers, things like that. Whereas you go to the sanitation department when it's highly specialized garbage trucks with a bunch of mechanisms that, can kill you if you touch them wrong. The cross-training we offer with the Fleet department is very hard to replicate elsewhere in the city. It's almost unheard of.
Linda?
So when I first got on the council, we had a discussion about education benefits and, whether that was something we should provide or not. And I made a comment then, and I'm just going to repeat it now, but I feel very strongly that having that benefit or providing that benefit pays dividends in so many ways. And yes, there's always a chance that somebody might take advantage of that benefit and then at some point leave. But people are going to leave anyway for any number of reasons. So I think in the time that they're here and just in the overall context of the city, having a more educated work staff pays off for us in so many ways. And you mentioned several, but our main business, if we want to call it that, is public service. And I think helping our staff become more educated helps them provide better service is kind of the bottom line for me. So I am absolutely in favor of keeping this benefit, and I think it's one of the things that can also offset if we can't be totally competitive on pay. Things like this can help sweeten that pot and make up for that deficit. So totally like this program.
We have seen quite a few of our police officers and our firefighters utilize this program, and you are seeing those people with degrees move up through rank advancement. You are also seeing people that get a degree through the city program and then they go to a different job at the city, but most of them are choosing to stay here with us. They just want to go into a different area or just a different department to try something new. We're not seeing a ton of loss on this, but it is a valid question that we revisit on a regular basis.
Right, I'm not opposed to it at all, but I do believe that there needs to be some sort of reciprocal commitment. So I'm glad that that's in place.
It is.
Because I think that that's legitimate and fair.
It is.
Okay, Roger.
The other side of this is that, as I've read, a lot of people will have 3 different or 4 different careers compared to one.
It's a little, that's a little low for today's numbers.
Yeah, but so the assumption that we're going to train somebody and keep them is out of conjunction with what is really going on in the rest of the world. So we need to be, I think if we're going to attract good people, we got to attract people on the basis that they may be preparing for something else, but we will get the best they've got while they're here. And I think that's an important perspective to hold.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, expect to.
Okay, super, thank you. Then with that, before we adjourn, I'm just going to turn a minute over to Jim, as we've made it customary, or I've made it customary to end the day, to tell us what we're going to do tomorrow.
The good news is we have another day of these meetings.
Yes.
Bad news is it's only going to last a half a day, right? So tomorrow, we're anticipating that we're going to talk about capital improvements primarily. And then we've got some other funds that we have activity in that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about federal aid projects, which is Fund 70. And that's where we're trying to match the amount of federal aid that we're getting on some of the street projects.
And that's what you said.
Yes.
And then Fund 78 is our general government capital projects fund. I'll give you an update tomorrow. There's not much of an update to give you on the federal aid projects as far as the remaining balance. In that fund, there isn't much at all. But in Fund 78, we do have a reserve in place, and we'll talk about that. And then, unfortunately, I see that we've got zoo improvements listed twice here. There's only going to be one report on zoo improvements. I've got it listed under item 3 as well as item 2. We'll take that under item 2 instead of 3. And then CDBG, we've got some police grants that we get every year. We try to appropriate that amount each year. We've got a police retirement trust fund, which is the employees that were in the police department, and they are not covered under PERSI. They're covered under this retirement trust. EIDC revolving fund, that's the Eastern Idaho Development Corporation revolving fund. Community Development Loan Trust Fund. We've got some custodial funds and Facade Loan Trust Fund, Employee Benefits Fund, Retirement Payout Fund. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. We've got a Property Abatement Fund and an Emergency Repair Fund. And I believe we'll probably have some follow-up for you on the Business Improvement Fund from today. And any other questions, of course, and try to wrap it up tomorrow.
So I just realized when Claudia said, is that what we just talked about? That's what we just talked about. However, I did realize this Business Improvement Fund, I believe, is the downtown, the merchants downtown are taxed for that, and so
it's actually different than
it's
the
a different than the facade thing.
It is different, that's correct.
This is the BID, and I noted as BID, not Business Improvement.
So the BID, Business Improvement, is actually assessments that are done against properties.
Yeah, that's what that is, and so I apologize that it didn't click until we just looked at this facade.
It definitely wasn't clicking with me, so.
We're having an executive session tomorrow.
What's that?
And then we have an executive session tomorrow?
We do.
And then do we have a meeting tomorrow night?
Nope.
Oh.
Unless you want one.
No,
4 or 5
All right then, look at that.
No, that sounds good. Okay, well, council, thank you very much.
So much
Thanks for-
happier now.
Thanks for, boy, we should have told her that this morning.
You should have told me that this morning. I was thinking, oh my gosh, and then tomorrow night.
I love that.
I can do this.
Thank you so much, council, for being here with us.
I'll make your days.
And with that, we are adjourned.